Hey Ben,
Hey, Mel, how are you, sir?
good man. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Managed to binge watch the entire series yesterday. Very much enjoyed it.
One day?
One day, yeah. It's
Wow.
it's it's hard to stop watching what you started, and
It is. I'm
and
a
there's a
writer too.
I love how it's everything's sort of drawn out throughout into where whether it's a big role or a small role an actor has in this film.
Yeah.
Um, they're all really complex characters, and as an actor, that must have given you a wealth of material to work with, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that this was like, like when my roots are in the theater and like we've always been told there are no small parts. And that was definitely the case for this. Everybody is a cog in this wheel that is the kind of the machine that is the service members at the White House. And so everybody matters in a situation like that. And it also mattered, in the script and during the process of doing this too. We all sat in a circle, which is very rare. Sometimes there are
Hmm.
past chairs over here and over there. And with this thing, like we all sat in a circle and got to know each other and there was no hierarchy or any of that crap. And so it was really cool, man.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, it's a great ensemble piece. And I see you went to Sunny Purchase, which a
Yeah.
lot of actors went to. A friend of mine
Yeah.
went there a number of years ago.
Oh,
What's like
cool.
the most important lessons you learned while you were there?
I had to unlearn a lot of stuff. No. But no, I think one of the best lessons was that you just kind of the show must go on. That was a big one. And then I think the biggest one too was that, like I said earlier, that there are no small parts, and that when you're part of telling a story, we're all serving the story. And that goes for, and I think the cool thing about SUNY was we worked with the tech department as well. And they had an amazing tech department. So we knew and hung out with on campus with the stage managers and the grips and the this and the that. And I think that the biggest thing I'm discovering as I'm telling you this is that we're all part of the same family trying to tell this story, and we all have one purpose, and that's the story. Beyond, errors and who's better or who's more important, there's none of that. We're all workers amongst workers, and we're trying to tell this story. And I think that's what I learned, and it gave me great. I think it helped me learn humility to some degree, and yeah, and I try to bring that everything I do. Everybody's job is really important.
That is true. It's a great lesson to take apart. The whole no small roles, no small actors is something I absolutely swear by.
Yeah,
And I try to avoid bitterness in the sense that, maybe you don't get the part you want, but
yeah,
you can still do a lot with the parts you have.
absolutely. And I think I learned the most from very small parts. And I think that early on in my career, which was really cool, is that I did it. Nothing was a throwaway. You know what I mean? I dedicated myself as thoroughly to a very small part as I would to a very large part. And that meant getting to know who the character was and what his life was like and what he saw, the way he saw the world and his perspective on things. And I think what happened was because I did that, and I'm kind of a really hard worker that way, is that even in these small roles, people took notice and they led to bigger roles, which is kind of cool.
That's
So,
great.
yeah,
That's great when it works out that way. And
absolutely.
the thing that's interesting about the show is how there are moments where we're dealing with the truth and then we're dealing with alternate truths.
Yeah,
And as an actor, how did you manage that? I imagine that must have been confusing at times.
it was because, well, here's the thing. I read all eight straight through, right? So I
Right.
kind of know the ins and outs of all this stuff. But I'll tell you, as I was reading through this stuff, it was really hard to tell who was telling the truth, what was real, what wasn't, what was, because everybody's lying, whether they're whether they did it or not, everybody has a different story. And it's a story, people want to stay out of trouble. They want to this is a very important job. And
Hmm.
so I think people were kind of, in some degree, fearful for their jobs by telling, or the way that they're perceived by people to tell certain things, that happen throughout the night. A lot of shenanigans goes on that night. So I think everybody, you know, and so everybody's kind of trying to, like, present their best selves and it doesn't
Absolutely.
fly with Uzo's character because she sees through everything.
Hmm.
It's what I love about that character. It's just she's so she talks about this bird, a little off topic maybe, but she talks about this bird, which is really cool because she's a bird watcher. And she talks about this bird and the way it does things, which is it sees everything that's important. It sees everything as food, you know? And
Mm,
the drive it has to find the food. Anything that's not food is not in its, it's just not a thing. And that's the way she looks at all of these suspects and the case, and she's piecing this all together in her head in such a brilliant way. And I think that yeah, that was very, very cool, you know.
that was. I mean, Uzo, I love, there are a lot of actors in this movie or miniseries that act very dryly. Their sense of
Yeah.
humor is very dry, and it made me wonder if you guys had a contest as to who could be the drier actor on set.
No, she was not dry behind the scenes. She's full of life and amazing and hilarious and super cool, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, we did, it was written that way, and I feel like it was a great choice because she didn't care about her personality. Her personality was not a factor. And I think that's what's really great about this character is that she's not trying to impress anyone. It's, I think, a point that hopefully we all get to in our lives where we just do not care what anybody thinks about us. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like life goals for sure. And
Hmm.
so, she just doesn't care. She's all about the case. And so, yes, she does come across as very, very dry, but because of that, really, really funny, you know? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's nice to get to the point where you don't care about what other people think of you,
Oh man. One
especially when
day.
you're a kid. Yeah. Yeah. I'm still getting to that point. Yeah.
No.
It's a
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah.
But and I understand that the White House set you worked on spread over six sound stages,
Oh man. Yeah.
which
Six
must have
sound
been.
stages, an
Mhm.
exact replica down to the T. I mean, real books in the bookshelves, real things in the drawers. Insane what props did and what they did with that. It was just amazing. I mean, literally, you come from being in Hollywood and on the 405 or the 101. I don't know if you're in LA, but those are freeways, right?
I,
And so, you'd come from that, and then you'd go on this lot, and then you'd walk through a door, and it was almost like you were walking through a porthole into, another dimension or something. And it was kind of it was kind
I
of
imagine.
jarring that way because you were suddenly in the White House, And the only thing that, movie magic, the only thing, if you looked up, that was the only thing that was different, because we don't have any ceilings because we use
Right, exactly.
you
Yeah. I've
yeah.
been on sets like that, and it's
Yeah.
always fascinating how it draws you in, and the attention to
Oh,
detail is always great. I mean,
amazing.
was there a specific part of the set that spoke to you the most?
It was there were times where you just walk around, where you had a little time and you just walk around. And there was something really, I guess, just weird and cool about like sitting in the Oval Office, you know what I mean? Or not yeah, in the Oval Room, or sitting in the Lincoln bedroom, or being in these places that are built, to the T. And it was just this, I don't know, it was this weird feeling that like you were actually in the White House and all of the history that represented and all of that stuff. And we all read this book going into it. Most of us read this book going into it about all the people who've worked at the White House for all these years and how just how fascinating their lives were and how and I think that's the cool thing about this is because it's usually when we go to the White House, it's usually about politicians and politics and all that stuff. And this is nothing to do with that. It has to do with the people that serve the White House in the background and, and kind of don't get the credit that some of those people get and work just as hard, if not harder, and dedicate their lives to being of service. And yeah, I don't know. It was just, there was this interesting, I think we all, and it was this communal kind of like, vibe that we all had that was like, yeah, and we're all dressed as this thing. It was like this really amazing pretend land that we got to live in, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, the author of The Residence, the book the show is based
right.
on, has
Yeah.
written a number of books about politicians, about the White House and vice presidents and first ladies. Did you? I
Is
mean, I
that
imagine you
isn't
read the
that book
book.
amazing? That's the book I was talking about. And just
Yeah, absolutely.
stories of the people that work there and getting to know these people and how fascinating they were and the people that they had met and the stories. Oh my goodness, the stories are just incredible, you know?
They
Um,
are indeed. And it's nice
yeah.
that they have that because, yeah, they're usually always behind the scenes.
Yeah. And so now we have this kind of historical reference and we have these stories. And I think, thank goodness, because I think for years, a lot of these things happened and they just died with the people because you're not allowed to talk about this stuff to anyone. They're all sworn to secrecy the way, the Secret Service are or any other member of, the White House. And so, they can't come home and talk to their kids about this stuff or their family. Things happen
Mm,
there, no one else in the world knows about or gets to see. Yeah.
that's very true. I mean, it reminds me of the scene where you finally get the water pressure right in the shower for the
Yeah.
president, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And AB Winter comes in and is basically like, okay, next assignment. And the devastation and trauma on your face is very telling.
Well, I think
Um,
it's something that he spends months doing, and his sole
Absolutely.
purpose is to serve the president. And I think he's incredibly proud of this job and the role that he plays in, the United States of America, which is a
Mhm.
big deal. And I think it's a big deal for him, and it's not lost on him. And he wants to make the president happy, and he finally does. I mean, through just a series of like, let down, let down, let down. And then he pulls off the miraculous, I mean, they've had
Mhm.
NASA in there trying to figure this thing out. The list goes on, like, civil engineers in there trying to figure it out. And he finally, finds the combination and cracks the code. And he thinks, and the president gives him a hug. And he's like, he's just kind of, those moments that we're just kind of, we're wallowing in that. You know what I mean? Because we earn this thing that we've been, trying to earn for so long. And then because of his character and the way AB Winter is, he just kind of, it's just, yeah, we don't have time for that celebration. You know what I mean? On to the
Exactly.
next thing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's the nail in the coffin for Bruce in a lot of ways. And I think he's a guy that has had, you know, disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And he's been crapped on and crapped on and crapped on. And I think this is kind of like, to some degree, the last straw for him, you know?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what happens with a lot of people in any profession, you know.
for sure.
It's like how much frustration and disappointment can you take?
That's right. And on appreciation. And, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, unappreciation could be a real killer
For
sometimes.
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I was wondering if you had the chance to work with Andre Braugher at all.
You
He
know, I,
originally played Winter.
I didn't, but we had a few conversations, and that was one of the things I was really looking forward to. Giancarlo reprised his role, but he was just such a kind man, you know what I mean? And he brought that to everything he did. And I was really, really looking forward to it. And then we had a strike, and during the strike and the filming of this thing, he passed away. And but there was something, I don't know, he was an actor's actor, and he had dedicated his life to this. And I don't know, maybe there was a scene towards the end of it, you know what I mean, where we're all there and we're doing the Scooby-Doo thing where she's kind of going over all the, where she's going over all the suspects and why she thought this person and what she thought that person. And there's this kind of this apparition that comes to her in the form of AB Winter, where she's kind of passing the drink. And we shot it in a way where they shot her coverage, and Giancarlo wasn't there. And I swear to you, man, like everybody felt his presence there that day. Everyone. And I remember, I thought I was the only one. Everybody thought they were the only one. And like I said, we were all sitting in this circle and everybody was like, he was there, wasn't he? And I get chills right now because I really feel like his spirit was there, and this was a man who had dedicated his life to this craft, you know, and of course he was there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was an amazing presence in life and in death. I remember being really angry hearing about his passing because that just
Yeah.
it's one of those deaths that felt so
I know.
unfair. And I did meet him once. He was very nice. I was
Yeah.
afraid he would get me to confess to a crime I didn't commit while I was talking to him, but thankfully that didn't happen. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's nice to see. I mean, Giancarlo, I prefer to say he steps into the role rather than replaces Andre because there's no
Oh
replacing
man,
Andre.
absolutely. And he did it with such grace, and Paul and the whole thing. We all did it. I think everybody was there was a kind of it was an homage to him. And I think that Giancarlo knew that. And I mean, he was just another really terrific guy, and somebody I've always wanted to work with as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's played a variety of roles, and there's
Yeah.
still probably a lot more roles he can play that I can't wait to see.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Definitely. Um, when you got this script, when you got this project, you said it was one of the best scripts you ever read. How did it speak to you in ways that other projects haven't?
Well, I think it's a real feat. Because, like I said, there's 100 different characters in this thing. Literally, I
Hmm.
remember, when you're in the makeup or the hair trailer, they usually post people's headshots up above, so you can kind of get to know each other and really so you can remember each other's names and their characters, but also the sort of
Absolutely.
reference, of how they look and the actor associated with the character. And I mean, there was not enough room, you know what I mean? Because we had 100 people on the call sheet. It was incredible. And I think it spoke to like the talent of Paul William Davies and his ability to just intertwine and keep stories straight and, things informing things. And in this pilot episode, you're just sitting there and you're reading it and you're being introduced and he talks to you like a friend in this thing, which is really cool. You know what I mean? He says, well, here's Bruce. We're going to get to know who he is later, but stay tuned. And now we're going on to so and so. And you feel like you're doing this dance and you're kind of going through the White House and you feel like this fly on the wall, which was super cool. And that even though you're not seeing much of these people in the first or second episode, at some point they're going to have their moment. You know what I mean? You're going to be let into their world in a bigger way. And I don't know, he just was it's so amazing because he makes it seem so seamless. And I don't know, like the thought of me trying to do something like that is just like, yeah, never, you know. And it's
Absolutely.
why I love writers.
Yeah,
So,
I mean it's amazing how it's all sort of brought together and also edited together. It's like puzzle
uh-huh.
pieces being put together. It's hard to keep up with all the characters at first, but it
Yeah,
invites the opportunity to rewatch the show again.
right. And that absolutely. I mean, and I think it gets better because you start to see more stuff because it's one of those things that sometimes, yeah, it gets better. It's like leftovers, you know what I mean? They get better the day after, you know what I mean?
They
Or the
do,
second
yeah.
time, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
think what happens for
absolutely.
you as an audience member is these things seep in more and more, and you're like, oh my goodness, right. And look at that, and so yeah, it's really cool. And I think it's amazing. The response has been really cool, and it's interesting because it was like number one for like a month and a half. Like 2 billion people had watched it, over 2 billion people, and I think it's definitely it's because of how really good it is and word of mouth. It's like anything else. Speaking of food, it's like, a restaurant. Restaurants get their name not necessarily by publicizing or anything, but people eat there and it's really good food and you tell your friends about it, you know? So
Yeah, word of mouth goes a long way.
for
And
sure.
it's nice to hear that it still can.
Yes, yes,
And I also understand you grew up in Miami, Florida,
I did.
and I was wondering if any of your experiences there played a part in this role as Bruce Geller.
Well, I think they lent to me being an actor for sure. And I definitely grew up in a blue collar area. So yeah. And I was from the time I was a kid to when I was in high school, we moved 21 times. So which was wild. So it was all, every half a year it was new friends, new group of friends trying to fit in. And kind of what that does to you is you you have an opportunity to reinvent yourself, but to some degree you become a chameleon, and a shapeshifter. And I think that throughout that time, although it was difficult at times, it was pretty awesome because I got to meet all kinds of people, because I went to schools in different neighborhoods and different classes and different, and it was just, yeah, it was pretty cool. I think absolutely my early childhood and my growing up absolutely lent to any role I play, Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting uprooted is such a joy, isn't it, when you're a kid and
Yeah,
moving?
it is. It's weird. When I
It
moved
is.
out, we haven't moved in like 10 years, but when I move now, there's something about that, when you've got everything out of the place and there's maybe some like folders on the floor and like a can or weird stuff around, you know what I mean? Something about that has a deep effect on me still, you know what I mean? Where I'm just like, it feels weird,
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.